Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Junkyard Dawgcast. I'm your host, Jordan Hill. Got Ben Wolk with me on this Thursday evening. We are talking Georgia fall camp. We had a chance to go watch probably about 20 minutes of Georgia practice for the first time in camp. We'll break down what stood out to us, what we learned, a notable absence that I think caught some people's attention. And then we'll kind of work our way back to earlier Thursday. We had a chance to talk to Kirby Smart, a few different players as they got ready for the first practice of fall camp. So get this episode going in a minute. Be sure to subscribe to Dogs 24/7 on YouTube. Subscribe to the Junkyard Dawgcast podcast and go subscribe to dogs247.com. I would encourage you guys, keep an eye out probably on Friday. We should have a sale. So let's get ready and let's get this episode going. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Junkyard Dawgcast. I'm your host, Jordan Hill. Got Ben Wolk with me on this Thursday evening, and we are here to talk a little bit about the Georgia Bulldogs. Georgia opened up fall camp on Thursday. We had a chance to talk to Kirby Smart and a few different players, and the best part of Thursday, we got a chance to watch probably about 20 minutes of that first practice session. So we're going to really center this conversation on practice and also go over some of what Kirby Smart had to say along with those players that we had a chance to talk to. But Ben, you posted this on Twitter, on social media a couple times. Football's back, man. We have made it through another offseason.
You know, I say it facetiously a few times probably throughout the summer or as we're getting closer. I might even still be saying it a little bit facetiously. I don't know. I don't even know my own brand well enough to know that. But I will say, Jordan, we walked onto that practice field together, and I had that very real – like I turned to you, I think Kirby said something on the mic. I think he was dogging on DeMello Jones or Kyron Jones or someone like that at the time. And there's just the smell of the grass and, you know, the whistles blowing and, you know, it felt like football today. So for those of us listening that just crave football year in, year out, we wait for, you know, like I said, we get some samples throughout the year of spring practices and spring games. And I go to some high school camps and things like that, but it just doesn't ever quite feel real until that first fall camp practice. And it was nice to be out there today with you.
It's fantastic. Well, let's dive into it, Ben, and I'll start and just sort of talk about some of the things we learned, what really caught our attention. Wrote about this on Dogs 24/7, so I'd encourage all of you to go check that out. Got some good content. Ben did a great job with his photo gallery, some good shots in there, especially of some of the newcomers that we got to see for the first time. I guess I'll start there. Elam Adozi, didn't watch him for very long, but thought he looked the part watching him run with the outside linebackers. Really interested to see what we hear from him about him, you know, as this fall camp goes along. Watched Josh Horton, the defensive lineman they got from Miami, for a few minutes. He was in that pack of defensive linemen, a little bit farther toward the back, which doesn't necessarily surprise me, given I believe this is his redshirt sophomore year. And he's a guy that he wasn't quite as thick as maybe I expected, but he looks athletic to me. He looks like a guy that in time can get settled and can wind up playing an important role. Got to note the absence among the newcomers. Josh McCray, we did not have a chance to see him. He was not with the running backs. I mentioned this on the board. And we'll just say it's not something I'm concerned about based on what I've been told. I don't think there's any reason for concern, but I was a little bit disappointed. I want to see, one, just what he looks like. He's a bigger back compared to what we've seen, but also just to see sort of the pecking order and sort of who looks the part among those running backs. And this is not a newcomer, but I do want to say I was impressed just looking physically at Roderick Robinson, and he's a guy that I know Kip has talked about on this podcast and written about on Dogs 24/7, a guy that he's watching really closely and a guy that's got a lot to prove. I thought just looking at him as they were getting started, they went through a few different drills, but nothing that I thought you could really glean a lot from. I thought Roderick Robinson really looked impressive and really interested to see if he can get some momentum because he's a guy I'm super excited about. He's just got to stay healthy and he's got to be an option for Georgia going forward. A few other positions I can go through just on what I saw. Offensive line, I thought the most interesting thing that I saw, a little bit of a different front five than maybe we were anticipating. Michael Ooney running at right guard. Now, I always want to make the caveat at this point in the year. One practice session does not tell me, oh, well, Daniel Calhoun's out of it and it's Michael Ooney's job and you can go ahead and, pencil it in. That's what it's going to be. I think you're going to continue to see competition. But the fact that Michael Ooney was the first right guard up, that is interesting. Daniel Calhoun sort of led the way at right guard during spring practice, and then Daniel got hurt his foot. I believe that was the start of April, so he missed the last couple of weeks. So I think that's a competition we'll see ongoing. And then another competition I would point to, safety. Just watching some of the safeties work, it seemed like Kirby Smart was very impressed with what he saw from Ja'Cory Thomas. At one point, I was watching the safeties, and they were going through a drill where they were trying to high point the ball, going up to get the ball. Ja'Cory looked really impressive, and Kirby called it out. And if, especially the very first day of practice, if he's calling it out a positive, that's a good sign. So that's going to be another competition. We're watching safety, see who else gets in the mix there. But those are some of the bigger things that immediately jumped out to me. Ben, what about you? What would you want to share from the top based on what we got to saw at practice?
Well, I'm just going to kind of go through chronologically what I was watching while I was out there. So I started out with the defensive backs, and Kirby Smart, that's where he was actually at the start of the practice when I got there as well. It's funny. I was having this thought as I was out there, and this is more not just for defensive backs, just in general. Like Kirby Smart obviously dogs on people on the mic. You hear that pretty regularly. I find it interesting. I don't know who all I heard him kind of getting after today, but DeMello Jones was one. Kyron Jones was one. Michael Ooney was another one. And it's interesting because those are all guys that I think are key potential contributors at their positions this year, right? Like DeMello Jones, Georgia would like to see a little bit more depth in the secondary, maybe even have him make a push at star. I think that Kyron Jones, you mentioned him on our last show as someone that you think could make a push at star as well. And so, I think it's interesting that those are the names that were coming up when Kirby was really getting after certain guys. You mentioned Michael Ooney might be first team right guard. And there's a reason why he's kind of getting after him more than maybe some other guys. Because, look, it was hot. It's the first day of fall camp. A lot of people were dragging out there. It wasn't just, Michael Ooney wasn't the only one dragging when he was kind of getting roasted by Kirby on the mic. It's just the way that it is. But I think it's a testament to how Kirby feels about the potential role that guy could have on the team this year. But I bring up all that to say, he was getting after Kyron Jones. He was getting after DeMello Jones a little bit while we were over there. Ja'Cory Thomas was another one that I think he was getting some positive feedback in the specific individual drill that they were doing. But Kirby Smart clearly showing some specific attention to that safety star room this year. I think that's something that's going to be really, really important to him. Like guys that just going through all the position groups where I saw them and said, man, like they're looking like a Georgia football player these days. I mean, Ella Mendoza is certainly one. At outside linebacker, I find it interesting. I think Chase Linton and Darren Akinnigbon are probably further along physically than you might have guessed, especially even maybe in comparison to Isaiah Gibson, who was that top 10 five-star type. Not to take anything away from Isaiah Gibson. I just think that the margins between those three are maybe thinner than people would have thought. They all look college ready, early on in their careers. I do think Ella Mendoza and Quintavious Johnson just have a different look to them than just about everyone else in that room. I mean, Gabe Harris was getting some work there. Chris Jones was getting some work there. So guys that we know, are sort of hybrid positioning with linebacker or defensive end along with that outside linebacker room. But I think that Ella Mendoza and Quintavious Johnson, they just have they have that NFL look to them that maybe some other guys don't quite have yet. On the defensive line, I'm really impressed with the bodies on the defensive line right now. Like we talked early in spring, especially just how thin we felt that room was. in numbers. And sure, adding, I know it's not defensive end, or defensive line, but adding Elo Mendoza up front gives you a little bit of comfort there. Adding a Josh Horton gives you a little bit of comfort there. But even the guys that they've recruited out of high school, we haven't seen a whole lot of, outside of Christian Miller, really. We haven't seen a whole lot of Jordan Hall and Joseph Jonah Ajonye and Jordan Thomas and Justin Green and Nasir Johnson. And we saw a little bit of Xavier McLeod last year, but we, haven't seen as much of that. And, obviously there's going to be a lot of conversation today. I think there were 3 or 4 questions about Elijah Griffin, even though he's never played a snap at Georgia yet. And there's a lot of other defensive linemen in that room that are going to be really capable. And so you just stand next to that defensive line. You say, man, it's a good looking defensive line. I got to say that. Nnamdi Ogboko, another name that I got to mention as someone that I thought looked better now than he did when I saw him in the spring, and look better now, obviously, than when we saw him last fall camp. And so I'm starting to get more optimistic about what I think that this defensive line could be for Georgia this season. I didn't spend as much time with the offense. I was sort of peeking at the tight end room, another room where impressive bodies. Like, it's funny where the 2 best tight ends at Georgia right now are Lawson Lucky and Oscar Dell. But when you go to a practice, your eyes kind of gravitate to Jaden Riddell, Elias Williams. And I will say Ethan Barbour put on some unbelievable weight since the last time that I saw him. And so, Oscar Delp says earlier today he thinks that Georgia has the best tight end room in America. When you're just looking at him, it's hard to deny that, knowing that the most impressive physically guys aren't even the ones that are expected to be the tight end 1, tight end 2 to start the season. And so that was really impressive. Wasn't able to draw a whole lot from the quarterbacks or the running backs, just with what we had access to today. And then, wide receiver, I didn't spend as much time with them except at the end, just grabbing some photos when we were on our way, when they were shuffling the media out the door. But, those would probably be my main takeaways. And I got to add this too. I mentioned Kirby Smart on the mic all the time. I thought his most masterful moment of practice when we were there was during punt coverage. And like I said, nobody's ever safe. He was saying that the media didn't care about writing down the depth chart for punt coverage. Jordan, would you like to contest?
I wrote down as much as I could in the time they ran off there. I think I got 9 of the first guys and a good chunk of the second one. So he said nobody was paying attention. I just want to let it be known I was doing my best.
Now, he was right. I had no interest in writing down the depth chart for the punt coverage team, but I thought he said something notable that we've heard him talk about this in the past when we've been out there. Like when Arian Smith and Dom Lovett were the Gunners last year, he would always say, look at 11, look at 6. He would call it out to NFL scouts when they were out there. Like, he was adamant about it being important. He said today, lost the two to the, so I'm going to say paraphrasing, even though I think I'm getting the wording close to right, but I'm going to say paraphrasing just for the, I don't want to be getting sued by Kirby Smart or anything like that. I think he said, lost the 2 best gunners in the history of college football. Who's going to step up? And he's sort of challenging it. Like Arian Smith and Dom Lovett, I think people take it for granted that you just did not return punts against Georgia. You just didn't. And they were really obviously the punters have been good, and that's a big reason for that. And there's more to it than just those 2 guys. But Georgia's going to be looking to replace those 2. I don't know who necessarily that's going to be. I'm going to have a more keen eye on it now that I've been called out by Coach Smart. I'm going to have a more keen eye on it should we get to the chance to be out there again to see who's in that role. But, Kirby Smart cares about special teams. There is a reason Georgia clean swept the preseason All-SEC special teams list, and it's part of it is the respect that people have for Georgia, but part of it is Georgia just puts such an emphasis on special teams. And I think Kirby Smart said at some point during the window where we had it today, I think he said, this is like the most, like punt coverage, like the most important team or the most important unit on the football team. Like, obviously in his coaching element, trying to reinforce certain things to the players that were on that punt unit. But I thought it was notable, and I'm interested to see who the Gunners are for Georgia this season.
Yeah, we'll have to pay attention to that. And a little bit later on, they were going through some drills, sort of like testing if you were a gunner. And T-Rob was watching over that really closely. So I do think that's important. I think it's easy to forget about that, Dom Lovett and Arian Smith, we think about them as in terms of the passing game and what they meant there, but more, just as importantly, they were so reliable. 2023 season, Georgia did not allow a punt return, and they're going to have to replace that. And we'll have to see how they go about doing that. Trying to think of anything else that stood out to me. Saw Brett Thorson. It was kind of funny, Ben. He was not participating in any of the drills. He's still working his way back. Kirby's kind of pointed to that first game sometime around and then when Brett Thorson will be back. But Brett was just like walking on the sideline and just kind of chit-chatting with people, like, some of the people he recognized, and he was talking. So didn't really surprise me there. Other than that, I thought on the whole what we got, about 20 minutes, I was pretty pleased. Got a good chance to kind of look around, see what we thought of different guys. I did want to point out defensive line. You mentioned those guys. When I was over there at one point, I thought Trey Scott was really working closely with Joseph Jonah and Janye, and there are several guys I can point to on this team that I'm really interested to see what they do this fall camp. I mean, Joseph's up there on that list. I mean, you and I were talking about the fact Gabe Harris working a little bit at outside linebacker. I can see a world where they play Gabe, standing up some, and that opens a big opportunity to Joseph, who, I was super excited about when he got to Georgia last year. He has that foot injury, ends the season early. I see a lot of potential in Joseph going into his second year.
No, I completely agree with that. And just that defensive line, I think one of the reasons I've been hesitant to be overly confident about this Georgia football team is just because we haven't seen in action at Georgia with many of these defensive linemen. But if we're just looking at talent and pure ability, I mean, I feel pretty strongly about this defensive line now that I've gotten a chance to see them up close this fall.
All right. Anything else from the practice part of this, Ben? Anything else you want to throw in there?
Nothing that I can really think of. I will say to anyone that's never, like, if you're ever around Athens and Georgia's got a football practice, like, just find your way, like, strolling around the street just so you can hear some of the things that Kirby Smart says. I don't want to spoil all the good stuff that he had. He had some gems today, some that I'm going to probably choose to leave out of the podcast for his own sake and listeners' sake if there's any children listening. But, yeah, maybe don't bring your kids, but swing by and hear what Kirby Smart has to say, because you're going to have a laugh on more than one occasion while you're out there.
Yeah, if you are anywhere in the vicinity of Buttsmere where they practice, do not bring your children, or at least earmuffs. Gotta go earmuffs. There was one other thing. I knew there was something else I was going to mention. Just toward the end, we saw a little bit of some return drills. Zachariah Branch, first one up. Wouldn't say that was necessarily surprising. And the guy I'm really interested in, sort of in that mix, Sakovi White-Helton. He was the next guy up around Zachariah. I think that Sakovi, everything I've heard through this entire offseason, I think he has made real strides before his second year. I don't know what his role looks like given what they've added at wide receiver, but I think Sakovi's got a very bright future. It's just a matter of, like so many of these young guys, finding the snaps, finding ways to get him on the field, because this roster does not lack for talent, especially in areas like wide receiver and in these return positions.
And I will say it is different this year than some previous years that Georgia's had, where we don't necessarily need to know all the answers week one or week two, like who's going to be playing what or what roles are certain guys going to have. It's not Oregon, it's not Clemson week one. Like, you've got an opportunity to try and figure some things out. And I think from we're going to get to see guys in weeks 1 and week 2 that we wouldn't have gotten to see the last couple of years in week 1. And I think that that's a good thing for Georgia, but just selfishly for us, just getting to see some of these guys that you do, like, if you're playing Clemson week 1 and it's a 1 possession game at halftime, there's a lot of players on your roster that you would love to be able to see that you're just not going to get to see. I don't think you're going to run into that this year. And so I think that that's, nice from a viewing standpoint too.
Ben absolutely slandering the defending Sun Belt champion Marshall Thundering Herd. I would expect
new coaching staff, complete overhaul. Everyone knows how much Marshall botched that situation at the end of the year. So
yeah, you're not wrong. But the thing too, to kind of go off of that point, I mean, I have to think that for some of these younger guys, that fall camp's always important. You're fighting for jobs, but there has to be that part of you that's like, this is an opportunity. If I play really well, if I practice really well these next few weeks, I can get in against Marshall. I can get in against Austin P. And that's the route to going out there doing that well. And you wind up earning snaps. You might even be in the mix for a starting role.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, come back and talk about what we heard before practice. We had a chance to talk to Kirby Smart and a few players, got some clips of Coach Smart from that. Before we do that, I want to encourage you all to go to Dogs 24/7, sign up. Right now, we got a 30% off sale or pay $1 for your first month. And I would encourage you all to stay glued to Dogs 24/7 these next few days. I believe we will have another sale celebrating the start of fall camp and football being right around the corner. Do that. You get all the team coverage. You get all of Ben's great work on the recruiting side. We got Olivia Sayer who will come on board, help us with football. And then when baseball season's around, Olivia will be taking the lead there. It won't be long before we're talking about men's basketball again, and Georgia trying to grow and bounce back and take a step forward after making the NCAA tournament last year. So great time to join the Junkyard, and we hope you guys will do so. So we'll take a quick break and be right back. All right, Ben, before we got to the practice field, we had a chance to hear from Kirby Smart. A little bit later on, we heard from Oscar Delp, Raylan Wilson, Micah Morris. Some good stuff there as they get ready for the start of fall camp. And that first media session ahead of fall camp is always – it's kind of an interesting one because there's not a ton you can glean and not a ton you can talk about when it comes to practice. Those guys haven't been out there. But I thought Kirby's time at the podium – sort of got a little philosophical, kind of more about like how you approach fall camp and what he's looking for. And he even talked a little bit about himself and sort of his mindset. But I wanted to start with this clip. Someone asked him about some of the younger players and like what they need to do over this next month, what they need to grow and improve on. This is what Kirby had to say.
Mindset. It's the only thing they can work on because they're going to be overwhelmed by the speed, the tempo of practice. Can I fail and can I pick up and go again? And it's been seen over and over again. These NFL guys come in, how does he learn? How does he learn? How does he learn? And like when they come from our program, they're going to learn well. They've had to learn well. But can they overcome failure and adversity? And so many of them come in with, because of social media, heavy accolades, heavy expectations, and the drop from how high they come in to where they fall to when they fail is so deep in depth that it's really hard to build them back. So we have to be really careful as coaches that we're make sure we point out when they do things right and make sure we explain to them that it's okay to fail. You actually grow through that failure, and a lot of our guys are starting to realize that.
Ben, I thought that was really interesting. I thought that was good insight when you think about how hard this next month is going to be for the entire team, but also those young guys. These guys, really not just like the freshmen, also some of these guys are just transferred in, the way Georgia pushes these guys. And I don't know if you noticed this when we talked to Micah Morris, someone asked him about like his first fall camp, and you could tell he was just like, man, he was like trying to stay awake in meetings, and like it is such a grind, but it's designed that way. And I thought that was what was really interesting from Kirby there, was talking about understanding that how, when the guys that are going through this for the first time are not used to failing. And I think that's a good sign of a good coach that recognizes that and tries to kind of brace that fall a little bit, because there's going to be bumps in the road. But, Georgia counts on these guys to eventually get it, and they're going to try to put them in a position to succeed.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody, even me or you, I don't think I fully understand just how hard Georgia fall football camp is. There's so, like, it was funny, the fact that Micah and Kirby both brought up staying awake in meetings as like one of the important things. It's like, it sounds like such a simple thing. But it's like when you're working at the level that they're working, I think it's 15 practices in 18 days, a lot more. Like they had a walkthrough this morning before they're actually doing a real practice today. It's like they've got so much going on, and then meetings all in between that, install. Like Micah Morris said, like one of the biggest pieces of recommendation I'd give to people is just like go to sleep at night and get rest. Like don't be staying up doing anything. Like just like go to camp and go to sleep and then go to camp and go to sleep. Like that's the biggest recommendation I'd give you. Like it's hard. I think that's why you hear a lot about the freshman wall. And it's why I think, it's funny. I am as high on Elijah Griffin as anyone, right? Like I've had a ton of exposure to him through the high school level. There's a reason why he was the 5-star player that he was and why Georgia recruited him the way that he did. He's getting a lot of questions already, despite never until today having been through a day of fall camp. And I think when some of the other players, like I think Raylan Wilson was asked about him. I think Micah Morris was asked about him. And they both gave glowing reviews of Elijah Griffin, but I almost feel like they both had the moment where it was like, the dude has not even had a fall camp practice yet. Like, let's wait and see real quick before I'm giving my feedback on this guy just because he was labeled as a 5-star. Now, again, that's all said from someone who believes as much in Elijah Griffin as anyone. But I do think like Raylan Wilson, I think kind of had that moment. They both said like the whole defensive line really, because I know they're coached to not highlight individuals or talk about individuals when they're asked about them. But it seemed like they both were like, hey, let's pump the brakes a minute. Like fall camp's hard. He's a freshman. Let's wait and see. And I don't think he's going to have any trouble getting through that or powering through that, but there's no way of knowing until we're 3 weeks away from now.
And if he does, it's an accomplishment because It is very much not easy. Thought this was interesting. Kirby talking about, the motivation for players and things like that. Kirby was asked about his why, what keeps him motivated, what keeps him going. This is what Kirby had to say.
Drives you at this stage of your career?
Yeah, it's putting the pieces together. It's like the puzzle of this team is different than the puzzle of last year. And being able to decipher the difference in the two teams and maybe what the Wolk's needs are from me. Like, what does this team need from me? And what does this staff need from me? Like, where can I be at my best for our team? That's my why. And seeing a guy graduate. I just came over here and Ernest Green's got one project left and he's going to graduate this summer. And like that to me is like the be all and end all when these kids get an opportunity to graduate from the university that I went to, and they get a chance to start, play, and carry on their career afterwards. That's success. And there's probably not enough stories about that or self-gratification about that as opposed to when one fails or doesn't make it. And that's what my why is pushing these guys to get that piece of paper and also become better men.
Kirby had talked about fire, passion, and energy a little bit earlier and talked about, being motivated himself and that, you have to be at this level. I just thought that answer specifically, Ben, was really interesting to me. It shows Kirby's going into his 10th year. He's been around and he's done this for a while. And I do think that approach and the way he kind of looks at his job, I do think that's changed in the time he's been at Georgia. I think about his first year at Georgia. I think he kind of struggled to let go on some stuff when it comes to like running the defense and like being super hands-on with everything. I think he's gotten a better feel for what each team needs, what each coach and staff needs. And I really do think that's why he's one of college football's best coaches. He has gotten better in time of sort of understanding what his role needs to be. And I think it helps set his coaching staff up for success, and it helps the program as a whole.
Yeah, and when you hear him talk about that stuff, like you can tell he just enjoys being a college football coach. And I know there's a lot of conversation nowadays about the climate and the things that go into college football that never happened before. And I'm sure that those create headaches and frustrations that he would prefer to not have. But like, it sounds corny and some people say it's coach speak or whatever. But like when he says like, I'm seeing my guy that's probably going to be my right tackle. He's a project away from graduating this summer at the university that I went to. Like, you can tell that stuff means something to him. And I just think I actually thought it was a great question because I don't know that I've ever heard Kirby get asked what his why was, even though he talks about whys and skull sessions and all that stuff all the time. So I thought that was really interesting. Also, we'll give a shout out to Dean Legge. Asked him about his father passing away as well, which I don't know how much, if at all, he'd been asked about that since January. And it was sort of a touching moment. Like we're talking, it's interesting because we're talking, injuries and depth chart and, fall camp and all this stuff. And then it's like, it does make you have some perspective and take a step back and say, like, this is the real world that we're in. And he was asked about losing his dad and how that's changed coaching for him because his dad was a coach. I'm sure they had some conversations. Kirby said that they didn't really have a whole lot of football conversations. I don't know that I believe that a whole lot, but he said they didn't have a whole lot of football conversations, at least once he got to Georgia, and that, his focus was really on just his mom's well-being and that type of stuff as well. But added a little bit of perspective, makes you remember, like, Kirby's experienced some life this year as well that goes beyond things. And so I'm sure that this will be an important, special year for Kirby Smart too.
Yeah, he pointed out that it would have been his parents' 53rd anniversary a couple of days ago. So, I mean, I can't imagine how tough that is on everybody, especially Kirby's mom. I wanted to throw it to you, Ben, on just the one other thing from Kirby that I thought was interesting. You and I were texting about this before we started recording. Kirby has really made it a point to not say that Gunner is a starting quarterback and that, this is still open and they want them competing. But you pointed out something that he said toward the end of this press conference that I thought was pretty interesting.
Yeah, I don't know if it was a slip. I don't know if it was intentional. I don't know if maybe I'm listening too much into what he had to say, but you tell me. He was asked his very last question of his press conference. So, for anyone that doesn't watch the press conferences, the way the process works is right before the last question happens. One of the sports communications guys says last question. So Kirby Smart always knows when it's going to be his last question, right? And so he gets told last question. He gets asked a question about the two offensive analysts, John Lilly and Phil
Rauscher.
All right, thanks for the cover on that. Just sort of generally how they might help the run game this season. He talked about their NFL background. He talked about their offensive line and tight end background. And so naturally they're going to have involvement in the run game. And then like right in the middle of the quote, he just says, and we have a quarterback that allows us to do more. Or what was the exact quote, Jordan? I want to make sure we get that right.
Yeah, I'll be sure and read it. This is in the middle of this answer. Quote, we have a quarterback who allows us to do more. They both have been around systems that involve that, talking about the two analysts, Phil Rauscher and John Lilly. And he was kind of talking about, we're assuming Gunner's ability to kind of move a little bit. It was one of those where you did a good job kind of bird dogging that he wants to act like this thing is open. And, if Ryan Puglisi has the best fall camp we've ever seen, then maybe things get interesting. But it's just another sign. We feel good that it's going to be Gunner Stockton and maybe Kirby. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, if you checked Kirby on that, I'm sure he would say like, oh, well, I'd feel good about Ryan Puglisi or Ryan Montgomery or Hezekiah Millender. I can't imagine Ryan Montgomery in his brace right now that he'd be feeling too great about that and like the mobile side of the run game. But like he would probably be able to say these, referring to every quarterback, like, oh yeah, I'd feel good about him. And he could say that. I don't know if he'd believe it, but it was the first time. I mean, aside from him bringing Gunner to SEC Media Days, which I think is a pretty easy tell that this guy's going to be your starting quarterback. Aside from the fact that Gunner gets first reps with every time we ever see him in any capacity, aside from the fact that he was the starting quarterback the last, 2 games that we've seen, well, not starting quarterback, but 2 games, but the last time we saw Georgia run out there, he was the starting quarterback. Like all those things lead to the assumption that Gunner Stockton's going to be the starter. One reason or another, Kirby Smart won't say it. Gunner Stockton has said that Kirby Smart's never even said to him he is the starter. But the fact that he just sort of slips, we have a quarterback that allows us to do more of that. I don't know. I'm going to read into that. I'm sure a lot of people listening to this are going to now go back and they're going to read into that and say, no matter what Kirby Smart says, like Gunner Stockton's going to be the quarterback. Could turn out to be totally wrong on that, but it was the closest that I'd seen Kirby Smart come to insinuating that Gunner Stockton was the quarterback without actually saying that Gunner Stockton was the quarterback, aside from bringing him to SEC Media Days, which to me was the number one sign that he's the starting quarterback.
I feel like I'm looking at this with Stay Wolk goggles on. I'm understanding the way the wheels turn. And No, I'm with you. I think Gunner's the guy, and it was sort of one of those where Kirby was probably glad he didn't have a follow-up because that probably would have been pointed out that he said that. Want to go over just briefly what the players had to say. I was interested with Oscar Delp. I had asked Kirby about him, and he said that Oscar had gotten an award for one of the most improved in terms of his work ethic and what he's done in the weight room. And I asked Oscar about that, and the point he made was, I know that this is going to be my last year, and I want to basically give it everything I got. And I want to have a really big year. And to me, that should be music to Georgia fans' ears. I think that I was really impressed in the spring. He was very candid of being like, yeah, I kind of had one foot out the door as far as looking to the NFL and thinking about what's next. And he kind of came to the realization that he sort of felt like, he had let that year get away from him. And, it seemed like from like November on, he had a really big end to that junior season. So I think that really bodes well for Oscar. Elsewhere, Micah Morris, he was asked about staying at Georgia. He was like, I committed here. I was 17. My plan was to be here. I love it here, and this is where I wanted to be. Thought that was really interesting. And, just his mindset, too, of getting ready for another fall camp and understanding, as a guy that's been through it several times now, the importance of taking it one day at a time and not getting caught up on, having a bad practice or, having an off day, being able to work through that and try to maximize the time you got. Raylan Wilson, too, he talked about, he felt like the room at the linebacker position is relentless and that they've really stepped up the entire room in terms of leading the defense. And when you think about those really great Georgia defenses, I feel like they were led by linebackers, and it usually was not just one linebacker. You had several guys step up. Thought Raylan was really impressive, and I really think that C.J. Allen, Raylan Wilson, probably Chris Cole and Justin Williams too have a chance to make a lot of noise. It can make some big plays over the course of the season. Anything from the players today, Ben, that caught your attention? Anything we haven't gone over?
Well, I was having the thought, and I don't even know how I would figure this answer out, but I can't imagine there's been that many. Has Micah Morris ever started a game before?
Not to my knowledge. Now, I could check that if there was like an injury along the way. I think, maybe he has started in like an injury situation.
Well, the reason I asked that is because I can't think of anybody else that's ever graduated from Georgia before they started. I think it's pretty remarkable that Micah Morris, already a UGA graduate. He was the one that was in that photo. I think it was him. And then somebody from the 2012 team, I don't even remember who it was, that came back and got their degree. And so Micah Morris is sitting there, and there's a 12-year age gap or something like that between them, and he'd already graduated. So go ahead.
I was just going to say 5 starts last year.
Okay.
If I'm remembering right, I think he might have started some when Tate got hurt.
Okay. All right. Well, in that case, I take back what I was going to say on that front, but I was going to just mention what you brought up about Oscar and Micah. They both had their moments. Like you said, Oscar more candid than just about anybody that I think I can remember, acknowledging that he wasn't sure whether he was going to come back, really had hesitations about coming back, thought he was going to be going to the league, might have even been thinking about it a little bit too much going into last year or at the end of last year. And, him being back, senior leadership role, I think is really important for Georgia. And then Micah Morris, one of the many examples at Georgia. Everyone freaks out about NIL and the portal, and I'm on the recruiting front, and so anytime someone commits to Texas, the Georgia fans feel like they shouldn't. All of a sudden, everybody in the world, has the same philosophy on what they should be deciding upon and where they should be going. Micah Morris, one of a long list of people that did not have to stick it out at Georgia. There are so many people that you can point to and say they paid their dues at Georgia. They spent some time at Georgia. They could easily transfer, go somewhere else, and no matter what anybody says about those places, has probably just as much of a chance to be drafted day 1, day 2 as they would have if they stuck around. Micah Morris clearly is a guy that wanted this moment at Georgia. He wanted it to be his year. He said, I think he described it as his one last, I don't think he said one last hurrah, but his one big final year. And I think that him and Oscar Delp are both approaching this year really similarly. And I find that interesting that they were two of the first guys that we got to speak with this fall, in that I think they haven't quite gotten to do everything that they've wanted to do since they've been at Georgia. And this year is going to be an opportunity for them to be able to do it. And in both cases, I think this will be their one last final year at Georgia. I mean, in Oscar's case for sure, but Micah, I would assume that way as well.
Yeah, maybe I'll have a rise and grind about that probably Saturday. Maybe that's something to keep an
That's a
eye
good
on.
plan.
One thing I want to shout out, because you were talking about some of the revenue stuff, I thought this was really interesting. Raylan Wilson was asked about basically now you're getting revenue sharing. What is that like? What is that important to you? Quote, on my end, I came in not caring about the money. We didn't talk about money before I came here. I was just focused on development and the bigger thing after this. And I'd have to imagine that excited some Georgia folks.
Yeah, I mean, the quotes from him and CJ Allen over the last few weeks talking about that in the wake of Tyler Atkinson picking Texas probably should make people realize there's a lot of different approaches to the decision-making processes. You can't blanket everyone and say everyone makes their decisions based on this, because there's a lot of different methods that people use to make their life decisions.
Well, Ben, we've got one day of practice in the books. Parting thoughts, anything you want to share before we end this episode?
Bummed we didn't get to see Josh McCray. I've been on the Josh McCray bandwagon. I would have liked to see him out there today, simply because I don't know if we'll get another photo opportunity, and I want to make sure that we have some Josh McCray photos, which we currently do not. So I'm bummed that we didn't get to see him. Otherwise, stay locked into Dogs 24/7. It is going to be a busy few weeks, spring or fall. I'm getting my seasons all messed up. And then the football season is right around the corner. I think someone said 30 days until kickoff. 30 days until kickoff. That has me fired up.
Can't wait. Ready for it. And I hope we don't have to turn to AI to get a Josh McCray. What if that was just the turn we took at Dogs 24/7? We just start using AI art because we don't have any Josh McCray pictures.
I mean, I don't think anybody will necessarily take issue to it. I mean, people are going to be pissed at Dogs 24/7 about something. So if it's AI images, I guess that's better than some of the alternatives.
Well, on that note, we're going to end this episode. I appreciate
Thanks to our subscribers, by the way. I appreciate our subscribers first and foremost.
Absolutely. And if you haven't already, why don't you join those subscribers by going to Dogs 24/7. Again, 30% off sale or $1 for your first month right now. Anticipating a different sale pretty soon as we enjoy and celebrate the start of fall camp and preseason practice, and the season being about a month away. Go to our YouTube at Dogs 24/7. Subscribe to the Junkyard Dawgcast wherever you get your podcast. Please follow. Please rate and review. That really helps us a ton. Go to our TikTok. Finally got that fired back up with that Raylan Wilson quote I mentioned a few minutes ago. Subscribe to it there. A lot of good content. And Ben, this is the best time of year because there's video, there's stories, there's all kinds of stuff we can do between now and the start of the season. And it's just going to continue into the actual season. So we will end this episode right there. For Ben Wolk, I'm Jordan Hill. Until next time, take care, everybody.